Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Introverts in Business podcast. I'm Dave Baldwin and I'm honored today to have our guest Calley Gerber here.
Okay.
And Calley has a couple of interesting businesses that we're going to talk about. She practices animal law, which I'll let her tell a little bit more about that, and is also a business coach. But just a little bit of background on how I originally met Calley. She and I are in Toastmasters together. And she was one of my founding members when we started a business and self-development book club. And through some of those discussions, I got to know Calley a little bit better. And I found that one of my favorite business books is Good to Great by Jim Collins. I've shared about that in a couple of the other podcasts that some of you may have seen. And there's one of the concepts that Jim Collins talks about is the Hedgehog Concept, where he says there's basically three specific areas that differentiate successful companies from unsuccessful companies. And one is that they have a clear understanding of what they can be the best in the world at, they have a passion for what they're doing, and they have a clear understanding of what he calls the economic engine, or essentially what you can make money at. And as I got to know Calley and started to hear more about her business and everything, I saw that she really had mastered that hedgehog concept better than most of the typical businesses that I've run across. And it kind of got me excited about talking to you in the podcast, really interested to hear more about how that journey has progressed and the evolution that's led to where you are. So before we get into that, Calley, if you want to just maybe introduce yourself a little bit, tell us about your business and tell us what brought you here.
Sure. My name's Calley Gerber. I have an animal law firm called Gerber Animal Law Center. First question I always get is, animal law, what is that? And it's very broad in that it encompasses a lot of legal problems or other problems if they have to do with animals. So everything from companion animals, somebody hurt my animal, whether it's a veterinarian, a breeder, a groomer maybe, to your neighbor possibly hurting, or it can go into exotic animals. Worked on a case where we got a bear out of a roadside zoo and sent to a sanctuary in California, to wildlife issues that I deal with. So there is not a typical day for me in the office, but it's any area of law that would affect something with animals. I also help rescue groups become nonprofits, help them with their contracts, their agreements to help protect animals. So anything that's basically in the interest of protecting animals or representing their interest, I get involved in with that firm.
So what made you decide to get into animal law, of all the different things you could possibly do? Like, what led you down this path?
Actually, I was general counsel for a company. For 8 years, I'd been with the company. Great job. Really liked the people I worked with. They liked me, was doing well, advancing in the company. And I found myself dissatisfied. I didn't feel fulfilled. And luckily, I went to my boss and told him about this. He was the president of the company. He encouraged me to actually explore that more. So I worked with a coach, a life coach. I didn't even know what they were at the time. It turns out I tested off the charts for altruism. If I wasn't trying to make the world a better place in some way, I wouldn't feel fulfilled and happy. So the next day, I quit my job. Not knowing exactly what I would do, just that it was going to probably have something to do with animals, because I had always done that through my volunteer work, and that I was going to try to make the world a better place. I looked at getting into animal law, which, I had been a lawyer, so I had lots of experience being an attorney, about 14 years at that point, but I didn't know anything about animal law. They didn't offer it in law school, and I had to self-teach it to myself. But I knew immediately, upon looking at that area and seeing that it wasn't met, that there wasn't an animal law firm out there, there wasn't this avenue for people to go to find help, that it was something I wanted to pursue and something I wanted to create.
And it is a pretty rare niche, if I understand correctly. I think you said there was very few firms, even anywhere in the country, doing exactly what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I don't know of very many. I believe there's only a handful that do a full-time animal law practice. So you'll see, it's very challenging financially. There's a lot of folks who will do animal law on the side. So they may be a family law practitioner, or they may have a criminal practice, and then they can do animal law as well, which is a fantastic combination because it allows those folks to be able to do lower fee work or some pro bono work, and it's very important. My students I teach, I say, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. If you learn animal law and you can help an animal here or there, that helps animals overall.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the things I always ask all the guests on my show, since this is the Introverts in Business podcast, where do you personally put yourself on that spectrum of, you've got introverts over here and extroverts over here? You got any feeling on that?
Yeah, I tend to fall further to the introvert side. I'm not 100% introverted, but I definitely recharge by spending time by myself or in nature or reading, quiet time, instead of getting energy from other folks. I enjoy helping people and engaging with people, but then I need to go within to recover more. So I'd say maybe a little bit left to center on the introvert scale, tipping to that needing my own personal time.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting patterns that I've pointed out with a couple of the other guests is there's the misnomer that people seem to have about the introvert stereotype of people that never leave the house and never want to talk to anybody. And I found that a lot of the most outgoing, engaging people I know, and I think a lot of people would probably make that observation about you, especially just kind of seeing how you've been in a public speaking type of a setting, that, oh, you can possibly be an introvert, because that's not the stereotype people think of.
I hear that a lot, actually. If I tell somebody that I'm an introvert, and they'll say, oh, you're not introverted. Absolutely not. You're so social. And yeah, it's very different. It's where you recharge. It's where you get to feel replenished and get your energy.
Now, do you spend a lot of time around animals? I know you've got some animals of your own.
I do. I have several dogs and some rescue chickens that came from a factory farm, and I also do wildlife rehab. I'm a state licensed wildlife rehabilitator, so oftentimes I'll have baby squirrels or possums or rabbits in the house getting ready to be released. And then any other animals that I have the chance to interact with. So when I go on vacation, hopefully viewing of wildlife from a safe distance and things of that nature.
Now, one thing I'm curious about is, do you find that it helps you to recharge when you're around the animals versus how it is being around people, or how does that work?
Yeah, I could be around tons of animals and it doesn't drain my energy at all, possibly because they're not talking to me. There's no draw on my energy to be with an animal, so that helps recharge mine. They just are willing to let you be however you are.
They're not asking you complex legal questions. And,
no,
yeah.
They don't care if you're in your PJs. They don't care if you're having a heavy day on the scale. They don't care how hard you did your workout today. They're just happy to see you, so that definitely helps feed my soul.
Mm. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the duality between your animal law and your coaching practice, and it sounds to me like you had a specific pathway that led you to really get some clarity around what your purpose and your vision was, and it helped you to really focus your energy around something that was more meaningful to you. Now, did that also help you to get into the coaching area, or what made you decide to develop the coaching business also?
Balance was one of the things that took me to coaching. So yeah, when I discovered what coaching was, I wanted to learn a lot more about it, and that was just a personal preference to start with. I became an animal lawyer because there wasn't that niche being filled. In other words, that need wasn't being met by people, and still, I started back in 2008 with the firm, and I will get calls on a regular basis where people say, I called 6 or 7 or 8 different lawyers and nobody will even return my call because it's just about a dog. And those people weren't having their needs met in the legal system. So it was very important to me to be there, even if the law hasn't caught up to where we want it to be necessarily with valuing animals, for them to have legal counsel, to have their questions answered, to have somebody compassionate there who understood their feelings about their animals. That was very important to me. If there had been an animal law firm when I left my job, I probably would have joined it. I didn't feel this burning need to create just to create, but because it wasn't there, I felt that I needed to make it come into fruition. And if you are an animal lover, people will say, oh, how wonderful, you're an animal attorney, that must be so rewarding. It can be very challenging. If you love animals, every day for your job to be somebody to tell you the worst thing that's ever happened to an animal can really drain your energy. And that's where the coaching practice came in later. Of course, the first few years was completely immersed in animal law only. But then to be able to bring that practice in and study after I had done years of studying with that, to help build people, to help them see their inner strength, their inner power, that we have no limits I tend to say that I specialize in the impossible. I've been told things were impossible multiple times in my life, and then I go out and do them. It's because impossible just means impossible for that person. They don't think they can do it, or they don't know they can do it, so they don't try to do it. But it doesn't mean that nobody can do it, and that's what I like to help people see.
Yeah, it kind of struck me that there was a lot of benefit to understanding how to arrive at the thought process of the same thing that led you into animal law. And so can you maybe just speak a little bit to what have you found to be the most useful for people that are trying to find their passion or find their purpose, or somebody who's where you were before you got into animal law? Have you found that there's any tools or strategies that can be helpful for guiding that thought process?
Well, when we work together in a coaching situation, the first thing we do is to clarify your vision or your goal. That main why you want to be where you want to be. If you were leading your ideal life in a year, say, what does that look like? How does it make you feel? Because you have to really connect to that. For me, with starting the animal law firm, there were lots of challenges. There were lots of challenges. But that passion I felt inside to help people, and how I wanted to fill that hole that wasn't being met by somebody else, that was what I would turn back to. So for folks who are trying to find their passion or figure out what their passion is, I would say to key into that feeling, how you want to feel, what your perfect day would look like if you had things just the way you wanted it, and then work back from that to establishing your plan of how to get there. But if you don't, I like to use the analogy of a map. If we were going to go to California, we're in North Carolina, we're in Raleigh, and you wanted to go to California and you said, oh, well, I just need to go west. If you just whip out your compass and try to go west on any road that comes along without knowing where in all of California you want to end up, you're probably not going to get there.
You might end up in Mexico.
Yeah,
but yeah.
And certainly not efficiently would you get there. But if you know I want to go to Malibu, California, and you have a road map that tells you, back in the days before we had Garmin, exactly where to go and what routes to take to get you there more quickly, you're less likely to get overwhelmed and want to give up along the journey because you see yourself making regular progress.
So do you find that it's better to, I think there's always kind of a duality that I look at between planning and execution that I sometimes look at. Do you find that it's better to err on the side of executing faster with less planning, or do you it sounds like you might also advocate the approach of planning more and being more disciplined about waiting before you pull the trigger? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh no, I'm on the opposite. Get into action immediately.
Get into action.
Absolutely. We are planners, not doers, as human beings. So you can get stuck in an analysis paralysis. Know where you want to go. Definitely, that it's important to invest some upfront time, and knowing that may change. You may set out for one place and decide that's not ultimately where you want to go once you get into action. Not necessarily giving up because it's difficult, but realizing that's not specifically, certain things may fall into line to help you better define where you want to go, and let you know that you may need to adjust that trajectory a little bit. And it's much easier to adjust which direction you're going than to start. Starting's the hardest part, so I encourage people to take action. Ask yourselves, once you set a goal, what 3 things can I do this week that will move me toward my goal? And absolutely hold yourself accountable. If you have to call a friend, if you have to email somebody what the 3 things are that you're going to do, and then check in at the end of the week, let them know how you did. Or send yourself an email reminder that's going to let you check in. But accountability is important because our lives get busy, and if you don't have that movement, you can get stagnant, and momentum is critical.
Well, and I think the thing about starting is you have to do it every day. It's not like you start one time and then you've just got this momentum. You have to just keep starting.
That's right.
Yeah.
Every day, moving towards it. And so picking the right targets is really good. Adjusting them as they go to keep you in your flow. But yeah, constant movement. I'm a fan of taking action every day. Every day, even the smallest amount of action will help get you there. Progress, not perfection.
Definitely. Now, just on the subject of balance, do you find any challenges now with balancing or juggling the different roles of being an animal attorney and a business coach at the same time? Do you have any thoughts or recommendations for anybody who might also have multiple irons in the fire?
It can be challenging. I would say to focus on one thing at first. It's easier to add on later, but if you are trying to pursue a true passion, you want to make a big trajectory change in your life, something's not working for you, you're not happy in some way, or you feel this inner burning to help, go after that one thing. Try to get really tunnel focused on the one thing to start. Once you've built that and that's in movement, you can bring maybe other people on your team. Then you can start to divert some of that energy, some of that attention to building something else. If your why is big enough, growing something out of nothing can take some serious effort. And there's nothing wrong with being part of someone else's team if you don't want to be the creator. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to be the creator, know that it's going to take a significant investment. And that's where your why comes in, every morning reminding yourself.
And I think that ties into what Jim Collins said. And for those of you out there in the audience who haven't read Good to Great, you'll have to read the book to fully get this. But I think hopefully there's one concept pretty simple about having an economic engine. And it sounds like you have to, for a certain period of time, focus your resources on getting an economic engine up and running and having a certain amount of momentum behind it. And then some of that momentum can be used to fuel some of the other things you may want to do. And I think it sounds to me like it's a matter of deciding the timing and the sequence of when it makes sense to start something.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and you don't want to pull the hot irons out of the fire too soon. You need to start with your kindling and build things. So in the Hedgehog principle, you want something you can be great at, something that can make money, and something you have a passion for. Now, when I started the animal law practice, I had no idea if it could make money. As a matter of fact, my goal is just to make enough to make it be able to survive, because it's very important to me that is there for people to be able to call that number, to be able to get help. And one of the really challenging things is a lot of folks can't afford legal counsel. So that can be a challenging part with that. But I wanted it to be viable enough. It wasn't ever supposed to be $1 million law firm or even a 6-figure law firm. It was just a public service type of thing. Obviously, it needs to be financially viable, but beyond that, the make money doing it was a low threshold for me. I cut my costs pretty severely to be able to engage in that when I started the business. With other folks, that may be a bigger component. So you might want to, when you're looking at your why, is that one of the big things? For me, the passion to help people. And yes, I absolutely thought I could be great at it because I knew I had the direction and the focus, and I would be able to give the attention to it that it needed.
I mean, it sounds like what ties all this together is the big why. That's what I keep hearing a lot of, and I think can be some temptation to take the easiest path to making as much money as possible, which is the pathway to mediocrity. And I think that's, I've had some experiences along those lines myself, but I think that it sounds like if there was only one thing you were going to leave the audience with, it would be to focus on identifying that big why. But is there any other last thoughts you have on that subject, or anything else, any other bits of advice you would have for the audience?
Well, I would say I am a huge fan of passion, obviously, but I do run into folks who haven't found their passion yet. So I would encourage those folks to use what I call passion's little sister, curiosity.
I've never heard that term before, passion's little sister, curiosity. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, curiosity is immensely powerful, and there's all these things with our passion sometimes that will hold us back from going forward. And one of the big things with curiosity is fear of failure is one of the top fears that people have. It can stop people from even taking action. Well, with curiosity, you lose that attachment to the outcome, because it becomes more of I wonder what would happen if. So if you don't know your passion yet, I encourage people to explore and get curious about different things. Without that attachment to the outcome, everything just becomes an experience. You have a learning experience. Whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience will probably let you know whether you want to pursue it more or how much it interests you. But just going out and having those experiences and exposing yourself to different things you're interested in can help you find that passion to fuel it. So it doesn't have to be this raging, roaring fire. It can just be an inquisitive nature, and that is so incredibly powerful. I actually used both passion and curiosity when I started the animal law firm because I needed to learn so much. Like I said, while I knew the lawyerly skills, the basics of animal law, I had to self-teach, buy books, and work myself through them. Luckily, I'm a voracious reader, and I love the subject matter, so it was easy for me. But yeah, if you don't happen to have that passion for some reason, or you're not quite sure what it is, get curious.
It reminds me of something I heard someone tell me a couple of years ago, where his advice was pay attention to opportunities to demonstrate acts of kindness. And he said, I don't care if you actually take action on them. He said, just pay attention to any opportunities that show up. And I just noticed that when I focused on just noticing things, the impetus to take action would come naturally versus trying to force myself to take action, which might actually set me back a little bit.
Exactly.
So it seems like those little psychological tricks can really be valuable if you know how to use them correctly.
Exactly. Every tool in the toolbox helps you get there.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you again for being on the show today, Calley. So you can find what's the website if people want to learn more about your business?
Well, liveyourinspiredlife.com for the coaching, or if you have an animal issue, it's Gerber Animal Law Center. It's Animal Law NC, like North Carolina.com.
All right. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.